Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is the third session in our West Virginia Abroad Webinar Series this spring, and I appreciate everyone's participation in these conversations around global learning and study abroad across West Virginia. And today's session is about a broader statewide perspective, and we're going to be looking at the development of a multi-campus study abroad initiative that has connected institutions across West Virginia since 2009. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. James Natsis, Emeritus Professor of International Studies at West Virginia State University. And Jim has been closely involved in the development of study abroad programming in West Virginia for many years. And today he'll be sharing a historical perspective on the Canada and Quebec initiative, including how it emerged, how it was structured, and how it was sustained across multiple institutions. So this presentation is framed as a case study, and I'd encourage you to think of it in that way, as an opportunity to reflect on what made this model possible and how elements of it might connect to current conversations across our campus. So Jim, thank you for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, Clark, like I said, I can't see you guys when I flip over to this, so just assuming you guys can see it, I got the big diaspora up. And so with Canada, and there's a few people that are participating right now, one in particular who's actually been up there with us from WVU, and some others that are familiar with this. Others this is all new to them. So as Clark said, this was established back in 2009 as a statewide endeavor. Here's a picture here of Bluefield State students more recently up in Ottawa, arriving at the airport in Ottawa with a couple of the faculty and a number of their students. Now, this stuff was created, he said it's a statewide multi-campus international initiative, and it worked. And we had a lot of pieces, thanks to WVU who managed this. And one of their professors, I was one of the professors involved down at West Virginia State. The funding was coming from HEPC. And so we had different players. Nobody was stuck doing all the work. And it was certainly over a certain number of years, we'd take a bus up there and bring in people from all different campuses. So Clark and I, have talked about this more recently, that, we're proud of what we've accomplished. And we want people to see that there has been things that have been done with the state, and the model has worked. So study abroad to Canada, why Canada? What was the genesis for this? Where and with which partners? What are some of the features of this, and what were some of the spinoff and long-term opportunities that have come out of this? So Canada, proximity, well, it's next door, and especially with a lot of tumult in the world, sometimes it's a lot nicer just to take a easy flight up to Montreal or Quebec City or Ottawa or wherever it may be. Safety, I would say with confidence, I feel a lot safer in Canadian cities, in the major cities, in certain parts of the cities, than I would in a lot of cities, and including where I live in Louisville, Kentucky. Familiarity, we've all are familiar with Canada in some way, shape, or form, whether it's through hockey, through whatever it may be. Some of us have been to Canada, some of us, are just, we've heard of. And it's the good thing about Canada, back in the old days, you can just kind of go across the border with your license, pre 911 days, but not now. You have to have a passport to go there. And, you have a border crossing, whether it's by land or at the airport, you're going through the same process as whether you're flying to Timbuktu, Mali, or in the Igbo country of Nigeria, or wherever we may be going. We have to go through customs. They have different currency there. They use the metric system. So stuff like that already, you're seeing kilometers posted, and your temperatures are going to be posted in the metric system. And we have to handle different money. So these are good things for students to help kind of break them in. And that was initially that stuff we thought about, like, it was actually designed for freshmen, and it really grew out of that. But, give students a chance to leave the country in a safe environment, It's not too big of a step up, but it gives them all the pieces. Universal healthcare. So when you start getting into different areas of study and interest, universal healthcare up there, a parliamentary government, stricter environmental policies, and indigenous peoples and cultures. And we had a chance to visit one of the at groups there outside of Quebec City during some periods we were going up there, different companies and franchises, and you'll see some pictures of, the Kentucky Fried Chicken is in French, and it's just the PFK instead of the KFC. French language, primarily in Quebec, but an interesting aspect of Ottawa, which is the capital, and it's right at the border of Ontario and Quebec, is that faculty and students, that aren't interested as much in the language or they can't operate in French, Ottawa runs in English primarily, but it's a bilingual-ish. I hate to use the term bilingual because there's really nothing fully bilingual, but Quebec is right across the river, right behind the Parliament. So you're in a region where a lot of French and bringing that aspect into some point of what's going on, or you can sort of set that aside and not have to deal with it. And West Virginia, here's one too, Clark, that I was thinking about too. West Virginia's largest trade partner. In 2024, Canada alone accounted for 42.4% of West Virginia's total imports at a value of over $2 billion. In 24, also 40.9% of the state's exports went to Canada. So that's always an important point. And these are sources that come out of the Reserve Bank of Cleveland. The genesis, Governor Wise back in 2003 created a West Virginia Commission on Internationalization. The commission released a report, and I was part of that. Clark came in on that at the initial creation of it. Guys like Jam Condi and others who been around the state for a while. And there were two key strategic goals within that: was to facilitate international partnerships and increase the number of students going abroad, because a lot of us were ranked pretty low on internationalization, people speaking another language, people were born in another part of the world, etc. So a lot of this was initiated by Clark and others that have been involved in this. And so we looked at Canada and Mexico as being two places, like you got two world languages, French and Spanish, and they're both neighbors, and they're both in North America. And that's been a model that we've used through grants and other things. So looking at Canada, it's a viable study abroad destination. And we look at partners. Well, because of previous contacts with Université Laval, and there was another university that had worked with them, we used them as a contact in Quebec City. So funding an organization, basically the Higher Education Policy Commission, HEPC, funded this. We managed it through WV's office. You can see a picture of Dan Wiener, who was part of the original team at WVU. Jennifer Orlikoff was the lead professor at the time, along with me down at West Virginia State. For some of you that know some of these people, we recruited students from all the institutions. That was including WVU, that was including Marshall, and everybody at some point, whether it's Bluefield or Glenville or whoever, Concordia, they all sent at least somebody up there. So these are just, we had some agreements with, I think WVSU had, since I was there, we arranged like an agreement with them, and we had like some flyers that would go out over time. The course, 3 credit hour or 1 credit hour to 3 credit hours each year is a little bit different. Now with Canada, it's close, and you got Quebec is a French language. The only fully French, the official language is French of Quebec, and the other ones, except for New Brunswick, is bilingual. The other provinces, English is the primary language, but the federal government is bilingual. And Quebec City is up further. Ottawa is the capital, which is down a little closer. And if you go up to upstate New York, like when we went up, when we're taking buses up there, we would start from Charleston and go through Flatwoods and meet some people, and then go through WVU and end up in Niagara for the first night. Obviously, if you fly up there, it's different. But driving, it took a long time. Buses are expensive now. I'm going up there with just vans with more limited groups over time with high school students and stuff. So the Université Laval in Quebec City, French-speaking campus. The only real English is when they do the programs for English language. I'm sure there's probably a course here and there somewhere in the medical field or something like that, or just research. And they got nice residences on the campus. And so we would have like these, they helped us develop programs. So we would get up there like on Sunday, and we spend most of the week there and leave back out on Friday. These were the initial things we did. So it was interesting because we would meet in the morning, and for example, there would be like a talk on a seminar on Quebec City's history. Like the next day, this is an example, Native issues in Quebec and Canada, Canadian relations with U.S. and Canadian relations, a seminar on Quebec and Canadian politics. And those were always kind of interesting. And we tend to use those morning lectures as a pivot point for going out. Like you see, like on the first day there, like on Monday would be a guided tour of the Citadel and the Battlefield Park, Museum of Civilization, etc. So we had different things, and we try to give ourselves enough time to soak up the environment. So Musée des Beaux-Arts, the art museum, the Place d'Interprétation, where you have like a historical rendition. You can see it, some of the ramparts on the bottom there, and some of the art, the fresque they have. The Wendake Reserve, which is in the northern part of Quebec City, is like maybe a 20-minute drive from where we were. Pretty interesting stuff, for those that are interested in that part of Canada's culture and history. The Chute de Montmorency, which is a fabulous waterfalls, and there's a park right on the edge of Quebec City. You can see some of our groups of students that are up there. The Museum of Civilization. Place Royale is basically where the concept of North America, Canada, and even preceding the U.S. started in 1608. So that on the top there is sort of like the where it all kind of started. In a very, very, very European city up there, La Citadelle, the Battlefields Park. There was a big battle between the French and the English, and the French lost, and that's when the English started taking over from that part of the world. Our students visiting the Minister of International Relations of Quebec. Quebec is kind of like Scotland, like Catalonia, where they kind of have that a lot of that controversy about becoming independent. So Quebec is 9 million people. They got a lot of infrastructure. They've sort of set themselves up for possibly, they've had periods they went through where it was pretty serious about breaking off. It's Europe, man. You got it's Europe that's placed in North America with a North American twist, and the parliament system, the building. And in fact, our students on the bottom there, we went to the parliament, visited the parliament. We had a lunch there the first year. It was hard to arrange that on a regular basis. You can see some of the images from the city itself, in Quebec City. And somebody goes up to Quebec, the signs are all in French. You get on a highway, you get across from Ontario or coming up from New York, and all of a sudden it's Bonjour Quebec, and your McDonald's is going to have the drive-through is going to be service au volant. Your subway is there'll be some bilingualism like in parts of Montreal, or a crossover in Gatineau from Ottawa, but it's arrête, and the highway signs. And so Bureau en Gros is Staples. That's the French version, of that. So other activities and stuff like we then we started adding like 1 or 2 nights in Montreal on our way back. We'd always go up through Niagara and come back through Niagara, which was a great way of breaking things up, and it's a great place for people to go for at least once. The University of Quebec, Trois-Rivières in Montreal, and Université Laval. We had students go up there for a year, couple for a semester, some for a summer. just different types of things we did. Students had a similar trip to Ottawa. West Virginia high school students, we went up there several times with high school students. Just a couple students, Steve, this guy over Steve Smith, there's a picture like during the winter carnival when he goes, it's just so freaking cold up there, and fantastic, interesting place. And another person, Hannah, who had spent a semester up there. Don had spent a year. He spent some time. He was doing Spanish first, and then he went to Colombia for summer. And then when he went up with, he liked it so much he wanted to go up there for a year. And he's the only guy I know that went up there for a full year. And some shorter, like on the top left-hand corner, I went with just 3 students once, and the one guy next to me, Chris, the shorter guy, he needed some, like, an international experience. So I had 2 other students. Like, let's just go up there for about 4 or 5 days up in the Ottawa and Gatineau area. And on the bottom right, the guy in the middle, George Homan, he's in his 70s now, and George has probably gone up into the university, the 3-week program in Montreal, like 3 different times. And it actually is my son next to him on the right, Ashton. And then you just see some students over to the left at Niagara. And high school students went up there. There was during the Fête Nationale. They bought some cheap hats and stuff from the dollar store or whatever up there, and had some fun. And so Ottawa, more recently, we decided to go up to Ottawa because it's less French. It's hard for teachers and people to go up there to deal with Quebec City, and if the students aren't studying French and stuff, it's it's I'm not saying people speak English up there a lot, and the tourist stuff is Englishy, but it's still it's not as easy to deal with. And Ottawa, similar, we created our own program there, daytime. We'd meet in the mornings and have little powwows and talk about what we were doing, what we had been doing, what we're going to be doing that day. And then we would have different activities in Ottawa. And here now you can see an overview in the top of Ottawa and the Parliament building. On the other side of the Parliament building where the river is on there, that's Quebec, that's Gatineau. So it's a beautiful placement in Canada where you got the French and English worlds that come together. People don't think about the Chinatown, up in Ottawa. It's a lot more diverse up there than you would think. And they got some good Asian food there. The Rideau Canal, which runs through, which we did bicycling and stuff, but in the winter, you literally ice skate on it, and it's a fantastic thing. I haven't had a chance to go ice skating up there in the Rideau Canal. And then in Ontario, it's mostly English, but then like in Ottawa, it's a lot of bilingualism. So you see French and next to English for a lot of different things. And the University of Ottawa on the bottom right corner, and it's like 40,000 students. Like it's touted as being like the largest bilingual university in the world. So for whatever that's worth. Then things like La Poutine, the hockey, the Winter Carnival in the right-hand corner, Celine Dion, of course, and then, like I said earlier, the PFK, the Poulet Friel of Kentucky, which has been around almost as long as it's been in the States, and they just kind of kept the old term and the symbol because it works up in Quebec. In France, it will be at KFC, And Je me souviens, so the license plates, Je me souviens means I remember. And they had a history that struggled a lot, being a minority in North America, and maintaining the culture and language is very, very important to La Belle Province, which is their name. Like we say, like Wild and Wonderful West Virginia, or it's changed a few times, but it'd be like La Belle Province. And then this Je me souviens is part of like, I always remember who I am. And So how can this model aid in developing other study abroad experiences, or even creating a new course, like kind of going back a little bit now and doing some kind of pilot project where we house a class and open it up to students from around the state through HEPC, and possibly go back up to Canada and renew that, or use a model like this for other purposes. So thanks for letting me just have the floor for a moment there, because anybody want to comment on that?